10 Biggest Mistakes in Public Speaking That Destroy Your Authority by Robert Hayes. Published by Audiobooks Hub. Introduction. Imagine stepping onto a stage, your heart racing, palms slightly damp, but your mind clear and your words powerful. The audience leans in, ready to hear you. They trust you. They believe you. That's the dream of every speaker, whether you're addressing a handful of colleagues in a meeting room or 1,000 people in an auditorium. Yet, for most people, this dream turns into a nightmare. Instead of leaning in, the audience tunes out. Instead of respect, they feel doubt. Instead of being inspired, they walk away unconvinced. Why does this happen? It's not always because your ideas are weak or your experience is lacking. In fact, some of the most knowledgeable professionals sabotage themselves in public speaking without realizing it. They commit subtle, yet devastating mistakes that chip away at their authority, no matter how brilliant their message may be. A great presentation can be ruined by poor delivery, a careless choice of words, or even a single moment of self-doubt displayed on stage. I've seen this happen countless times. A leader with valuable insights starts a speech confidently, but one slip, one unplanned phrase, or one dismissive gesture causes the audience to question everything. Or a young expert, passionate and well-prepared, loses their credibility simply because of the way they structure their talk. Authority, once lost in front of an audience, is incredibly difficult to recover. It's like a glass, easy to hold when whole, but once cracked, it's never quite the same. This book is about those cracks. It's not about teaching you how to deliver the perfect speech. There are hundreds of books that do that. Instead, it's about the landmines you need to avoid. The mistakes that look harmless on the surface but silently erode your influence. By understanding these pitfalls, you can protect your authority, elevate your presence, and ensure your message is heard and respected. Each chapter of this book will explore one of the 10 most common and most damaging mistakes speakers make. These are not obvious things like, don't forget your slides, or don't mispronounce words. They're deeper, more psychological, and more behavioral. They're mistakes like over-explaining, faking confidence, neglecting the audience's emotional needs, or using language that accidentally undermines your own expertise. For each mistake, we'll look at why it happens, what it does to your credibility, and how to fix it. We'll examine real-life examples and practical techniques you can apply immediately. But before we dive into these 10 mistakes, let's be clear about what authority actually means in public speaking. Authority is not about being domineering or rigid. It's not about showing off your credentials or speaking louder than anyone else. True authority is a blend of trust, clarity, and presence. It's the invisible quality that makes people sit up, pay attention, and believe you. When you have authority, even a simple message sounds valuable. When you don't, even the best argument sounds weak. Think of the last time you listened to a speaker who had genuine authority. Maybe it was a teacher, a CEO, a community leader, or a TED speaker. Chances are you didn't even question their credibility. You were too busy absorbing their ideas. Now think of a time when a speaker lacked authority. Even if they had good points, you probably found yourself distracted, skeptical, or bored. The difference wasn't just the content, it was the way they presented it. The good news is that authority is not a gift you're born with. It's a skill. It can be built, strengthened, and protected. The bad news is that it's also fragile. You can spend years developing your reputation, but a few mistakes on stage can undo it quickly. That's why this book matters. By identifying the biggest mistakes ahead of time, you'll have a roadmap for avoiding them. You'll know where not to step, so your authority stays intact. Another thing to keep in mind, these mistakes are not reserved for beginners. Even experienced speakers fall into them. In fact, sometimes the more confident someone becomes, the more likely they are to slip. They assume their experience will carry them through, but audiences are sharp. They pick up on inconsistency, arrogance, or disconnect instantly. Authority isn't a one-time achievement. It's something you maintain every time you speak. As you read through this book, I encourage you to reflect on your own speaking habits. Be honest with yourself. You might recognize one or two of these mistakes in your own approach. That's not a reason for shame, it's an opportunity. Awareness is the first step to improvement. Once you see the pattern, you can change it. And when you do, the transformation can be remarkable. Audiences will respond differently. People will quote you, remember you, and trust you. Your voice will carry more weight, and your message will land with impact. This book is written simply, on purpose. You won't find jargon, complicated theories, or endless checklists. Each chapter focuses on one mistake, explains why it matters, and shows you exactly how to avoid it. You can read it from start to finish or jump to the mistakes that resonate most with you. Either way, by the end, you'll have a clear understanding of what undermines authority and how to protect yours. In the conclusion of this book, I'll reveal one final principle, a kind of hidden mistake most people don't even realize exists. It's the ultimate credibility killer, the one mistake that can quietly ruin even the strongest speaker if left unchecked. When you learn it, you'll see public speaking differently forever. For now, though, let's begin with the first mistake. As you turn the page, keep this image in your mind. You're stepping onto a stage, the lights warm on your face, the audience waiting. You have something important to say, and you deserve to be heard with respect. By avoiding the mistakes in this book, you will be. Chapter 1. The first mistake. Talking without truly connecting. One of the most common and damaging mistakes speakers make, especially at the beginning of their talk, is speaking without actually connecting. They launch straight into their content, armed with facts, slides, or a carefully rehearsed script, but they forget the simplest truth. Audiences don't just listen to information, they listen to people. When you fail to establish a human connection first, everything else you say loses impact, no matter how valuable it might be. We've all seen it happen. Someone steps up to the podium, clears their throat, and immediately dives into their topic. Good morning. Today I'm going to talk about quarterly growth metrics. The room stays flat. People glance at their phones. Even though the topic may be important, the speaker's authority is invisible because no bridge has been built between them and the listeners. Instead of commanding attention, they're just another voice in the noise. This mistake is so common because most people misunderstand what authority is in a speaking context. They think authority comes from showing off expertise right away, rattling off credentials, quoting statistics, or speaking quickly to appear confident. But authority is not what you say about yourself, it's what the audience feels about you. And what they feel first and foremost is either connection or distance. Connection is not about smiling endlessly or telling a joke. It's about acknowledging the audience as human beings before you try to lead them anywhere. Think of it like walking into someone's home. You wouldn't just barge in and start talking about your achievements. You'd greet them, make eye contact, show some warmth. The same applies to public speaking. Without that moment of mutual recognition, you're just a stranger with a microphone. Why does failing to connect hurt your authority so badly? Because people equate connection with trust. When someone feels that you see them, they're more likely to believe you. When they feel ignored or treated as a passive crowd, their subconscious puts up a wall. They may still hear your words, but they're less likely to accept your message or respect your position. You become background noise instead of a leader. This is why politicians and great leaders often start their speeches with something that grounds them in the audience's reality. A shared experience, a compliment, a story that reflects the listener's own world. It's not just rhetorical flourish, it's a strategy for authority. It says, I'm one of you, I understand you, and I care about what matters to you. Once that is established, they can speak with power and be heard. The first step to avoiding this mistake is to shift your focus from what do I need to say to who am I saying it to? Before any talk, ask yourself, what's the mood of this audience right now? What do they care about most? What worries or excites them about this topic? How can I signal that I understand them before I ask them to listen to me? This kind of preparation is as important as rehearsing your content. You don't have to become an expert on each person in the room, but you do need to tune into their collective energy. Even something as simple as acknowledging the weather, "I know it's an early morning for all of us," or the context, "This is a challenging quarter for our industry," can make a difference. It shows you're present, not just performing. Another powerful way to connect is through a story. People are wired to respond to stories. It's how we've communicated meaning for thousands of years. A brief, relevant anecdote at the start of your talk can create an emotional bridge between you and your listeners. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It can be as simple as sharing a small personal experience that relates to the topic. The key is authenticity. Don't tell a story just because you think you should. Tell it because it reveals something true about you and why you're speaking. For example, instead of beginning with, "Today I'm going to teach you the top 5 ways to improve productivity," you might say, "Last year, I found myself drowning in tasks, working late nights, and still feeling behind. That experience taught me something that changed the way I work, and that's what I want to share with you today." The second version invites the audience in. They can see you as a person, not just a presenter. That makes them more likely to respect your insights. Some speakers resist this approach because they fear it makes them look less professional. They think authority requires formality. But real authority is built on credibility plus relatability. When you show a little humanity, you're not lowering yourself, you're building a platform for your message. People trust leaders who are both competent and human. They distrust those who feel cold, distant, or performative. What if you're speaking to a very formal audience, like a board of directors or a government panel? The principle still applies, but the form may change. You might not tell a casual story, but you can still acknowledge their reality, express appreciation for their time, or refer to a shared challenge. Even a well-chosen first sentence can set the tone. "It's an honor to speak with you today about an issue we all care deeply about." That small recognition creates a connection point. Another important piece of connection is nonverbal. You can say the right words but lose your authority if your body language signals disinterest or tension. Before you speak, take a breath. Plant your feet firmly. Make eye contact with 1 or 2 people. Let your gaze travel slowly, instead of darting nervously. These small actions tell the audience you're present with them, not hiding behind your notes or your slides. If you've already fallen into this mistake in the past, don't panic. It's fixable. Even mid-speech, you can pause, acknowledge the audience, and recalibrate. I've seen speakers rescue a failing talk by suddenly saying, "Let me step back for a moment. I want to make sure we're on the same page." That moment of honesty can feel refreshing and re-establish connection. The worst thing you can do is plow ahead as if nothing's wrong. Here's a simple exercise to practice. Before your next presentation, write the very first sentence you plan to say. Then ask yourself, does this sentence connect me to my audience as humans, or does it just launch into my topic? If it's the latter, rewrite it. Make it warmer, more curious, more anchored in their world. Practice saying it aloud while looking at an imaginary audience. Notice how different it feels. Avoiding the mistake of talking without connecting will instantly increase your authority. People will feel your presence. They'll relax and lean in. They'll grant you their attention and, more importantly, their trust. And once you have that, everything else you say will land more effectively. Remember, a speech without connection is like a bridge without support beams. It may look impressive for a moment, but it can't carry weight. Connection is your support beam. Build it first, and your authority will stand strong. Chapter 2. The second mistake: overloading your audience with information. If the first mistake is failing to connect, the second is drowning your audience in too much information. This error is especially common among knowledgeable professionals who want to prove their expertise. They load their slides with data, include every supporting argument, and try to cover everything they know in one talk. Ironically, the more they give, the less the audience absorbs, and the weaker their authority appears. Think back to a time you listened to a presentation so packed with facts that you stopped listening halfway through. Maybe the speaker was brilliant, but by the 10th statistic or the 15th bullet point, your mind began to wander. That's not because you were lazy or uninterested, it's because human attention is limited. Our brains are wired to handle information in small, meaningful chunks. When someone floods us with details, we go into survival mode, filtering, ignoring, or forgetting most of it. From the speaker's side, overloading feels like thoroughness. You want to be sure your audience knows everything necessary to make the right decision or see the full picture. You fear that if you leave something out, they'll think you're uninformed. But the effect is the opposite. When you bury your key message under a mountain of data, you appear unfocused. Authority isn't about saying everything you know, it's about guiding people to what matters most. This mistake erodes authority in 3 ways. First, it confuses people. A confused audience can't respect your leadership because they're too busy trying to figure out what you're saying. Second, it signals insecurity. Subconsciously, people sense when a speaker is overcompensating, trying too hard to be impressive or bulletproof. Third, it dilutes impact. When everything is important, nothing stands out. Your message becomes forgettable. Great speakers understand that their job is not to transfer all their knowledge, it's to create clarity. They think like curators, not dump trucks. They choose which pieces of information will have the greatest impact, and they present them in a way the audience can digest. They leave room for questions and curiosity instead of filling every second with content. One powerful way to avoid this mistake is to identify your core message before you write or rehearse a speech. Ask yourself, if my audience remembers only one thing from this talk, what should it be? Be ruthless. That one thing should be clear, actionable, and relevant. Then build your talk around that. Every story, fact, or slide should serve to reinforce that core message. If something doesn't support it, cut it, even if it's interesting. Especially if it's interesting but irrelevant. Another helpful tactic is to limit the number of key points you present. 3 is a classic number because people naturally remember things in 3s. It feels complete but manageable. If you have 10 ideas, group them into 3 themes or stages. For example, instead of listing 10 benefits of our new system, frame it as 3 major benefits, with subpoints under each. This structure gives your audience mental hooks to hang information on. Stories are also your friend here. A well-chosen story can communicate more than a dozen statistics because it creates meaning. People don't remember numbers, they remember narratives. A single case study, a vivid example, or a personal anecdote can make a complex idea click instantly. That doesn't mean you should abandon data. Facts matter, but use them sparingly and strategically, not as a flood. Visuals can either help or hurt. Slides filled with text, graphs, and numbers often contribute to overload rather than clarity. When designing visuals, think less but clearer. Use one strong image or one key figure per slide. Highlight what you want people to notice and explain why it matters. Your visuals should be a guide for the audience, not a crutch for you. Timing matters too. Even if your content is essential, dumping it all at once is a recipe for overwhelm. Space it out. Pause between major points. Give the audience time to process. Ask a rhetorical question or invite them to reflect for a moment. Silence can be a powerful tool for digestion. When you speak nonstop, you rob your audience of the mental space they need to absorb your ideas. Some speakers worry that if they simplify too much, they'll look superficial. In reality, the opposite is true. Simplicity signals mastery. When someone can explain a complex concept in plain language, we instinctively respect them more. Think of great scientists or leaders who can distill their expertise into clear, memorable messages. They don't look less intelligent, they look more authoritative. Complexity can be impressive, but clarity is persuasive. Here's a practical exercise. After preparing your talk, do a 30% cut. Go through your slides or notes and remove at least a third of the content. It's painful, but it forces you to prioritize. Ask yourself, if I had half the time, what would I keep? Often, you'll find your presentation becomes stronger, not weaker. Another test: practice your speech to a friend who knows nothing about your topic. Then ask them to repeat your main points. If they can't, you're still overloading. Even experienced speakers fall into this trap, especially when speaking to peers or superiors. They think, I need to prove I belong here. But an avalanche of information rarely convinces anyone. What convinces people is confidence, clarity, and relevance. When you show you know what to leave out, you project authority. You're saying, I've done the work for you. Here's what matters. If you realize mid-speech that you're overloading your audience, you can course correct. Slow down. Say something like, let me simplify this for a moment, or here's the most important takeaway from what I just said. Audiences appreciate a speaker who respects their attention span. That kind of responsiveness actually boosts your credibility. Avoiding the mistake of overloading will make your talks sharper, clearer, and more memorable. Your audience will walk away with exactly the message you intended, not a blur of half-remembered facts. And as they see you as someone who can distill complexity into clarity, your authority will grow. Remember, your audience doesn't measure your expertise by how much you say. They measure it by how much they understand. Authority is not about volume of information, it's about value of insight. Give them less, but give them better. They'll thank you and they'll trust you. Chapter 3: The Third Mistake: Reading instead of speaking. Another subtle but devastating mistake that erodes authority is reading to your audience instead of speaking to them. It might seem harmless. After all, you're just making sure you cover everything, but the moment you bury your face in your notes or slide deck, you send a clear message. I don't know this well enough to say it naturally. That single signal can quietly destroy the sense of confidence and leadership you've built. We've all experienced it. A presenter stands at the lectern with a stack of papers, eyes glued to the page, voice flat and mechanical. Or someone clicks through slides and reads each bullet point word for word. You can feel the energy drain from the room. People stop making eye contact. They check their phones. Even if the content is solid, the delivery feels lifeless. The speaker becomes a narrator, not a leader. Why does this hurt your authority so badly? Because authority is partly about presence. When you're reading, your attention isn't on the audience, it's on the paper. You're not leading a conversation, you're reciting text. People equate that with insecurity or inexperience. They assume you either didn't prepare enough to internalize your material, or you don't trust yourself to speak without a script. Either way, their confidence in you dips. Reading also changes your voice and body language. Your tone flattens because you're following written rhythm instead of natural speech. Your eyes stop scanning the room, which severs the sense of connection. Your gestures shrink because your hands are occupied. All these subtle cues add up. Even if your words are perfect, your delivery signals doubt. This mistake often starts with good intentions. Maybe you're nervous and want a safety net. Maybe your organization requires you to read an approved statement. Or maybe you've prepared so much material that memorizing it seems impossible. Whatever the reason, the effect is the same. The audience feels distance instead of presence. Avoiding this mistake doesn't mean you must memorize every word. It means you need to know your material so well that you can speak about it rather than read it. Think of your talk as a story you're telling a friend, not a script you're performing. You can have notes, but they should be a guide, not a crutch, key points or phrases you glance at to stay on track, not full sentences you recite. One helpful technique is to outline your talk visually. Instead of writing paragraphs, create a simple map of your main points, subpoints, and examples. Use keywords, not sentences. When you rehearse, practice speaking from that outline. This trains your brain to retrieve the ideas naturally, in your own words, instead of clinging to memorized phrasing. You'll sound more conversational and confident. Another trick: rehearse out loud, not just in your head. Many people practice by silently reading their notes, but that doesn't train your mouth or your memory. Stand up, say it aloud, move your hands as if you're presenting. The more you do this, the more comfortable you'll become speaking without reading. You'll also discover which parts of your talk need clearer transitions or simpler language. If you must read certain parts, like a quote, a legal disclaimer, or a complex statistic, do it deliberately. Pause, tell the audience you're about to read, then look down, read it, and look back up. This small act of transparency preserves your authority because it shows you're in control of the moment. The problem isn't reading a line, it's letting reading become your entire delivery. Eye contact is your ally here. Even a few seconds of direct, calm eye contact can rebuild connection. Practice looking up at natural pauses in your sentences. If you're nervous, pick 3 friendly faces in different parts of the room and rotate your gaze between them. This will help you ground yourself in the audience rather than your notes. Your body language matters too. Hold your notes low so your face is visible. Stand tall, feet planted. Use your free hand to gesture naturally. These small changes signal confidence even if you're still using prompts. The goal is to look like someone who knows their material and is happy to share it, not someone clinging to a lifeline. Rehearsal also helps with timing. When you know your talk instead of reading it, you can adjust your pace, add pauses, or respond to audience reactions. This makes you feel and look more authoritative. Reading locks you into a fixed rhythm, which can feel stiff or rushed. Speaking frees you to be human. One exercise to try: record yourself giving your talk without looking at your notes. Then watch it. Notice where you stumble or forget points. Those are the areas to practice. Over time, you'll need your notes less and less. Even if you still keep them nearby for security, you won't rely on them. It's also worth rethinking how much text you put on your slides. When slides are filled with words, the temptation to read them is stronger. Instead, use slides as visual prompts. One image, one keyword, one simple graph. This shifts your focus from reading to explaining, which feels more natural and authoritative. Sometimes the fear of forgetting makes speakers cling to their script. But audiences are forgiving. If you momentarily lose your place but handle it with composure, they'll respect you more than if you read perfectly but sound robotic. You can even acknowledge it lightly. Let me gather my thoughts for a moment. That honesty feels authentic and human, qualities that strengthen, not weaken, authority. Avoiding the mistake of reading instead of speaking will instantly transform how people perceive you. Your voice will sound more alive, your body language more open, your presence more confident. People will feel like you're talking with them, not at them. And when they feel that, your authority grows. Remember, a speaker's job is not to deliver text, it's to deliver meaning. Notes are tools, but your real power comes from your connection, your clarity, and your willingness to show up as a person, not just a presenter. When you speak instead of read, you step into leadership. And your audience feels it. Chapter 4, The Fourth Mistake: Speaking Without a Clear Structure. Once you've connected with your audience, limited your information, and started speaking instead of reading, another trap waits: giving your talk without a clear structure. This mistake is sneaky because it often hides behind passion. You have so much to say, you're enthusiastic about your topic, and you dive right in. But without a roadmap, your audience quickly gets lost. And when people are lost, they stop trusting the guide. Authority depends on clarity. Even the most brilliant content will feel weak if it's scattered. Imagine following a tour guide who walks you through a city without any sense of direction. They show you random streets, point at interesting buildings, but never explain how it all fits together. At first it's charming. After 10 minutes it's exhausting. You start doubting whether they know where they're going. A talk without structure has the same effect. Structure isn't just about having an introduction, body, and conclusion. It's about guiding your audience through a journey that feels intentional. They should always know where they are, why it matters, and what's coming next. When that's missing, even good points blur together. The result is confusion, and confusion erodes authority. Why do so many speakers fall into this trap? because in their minds, everything connects. They know their topic so deeply that the order seems obvious to them. But audiences don't live inside your head. They need signposts. Without them, they experience your talk as a series of disconnected points. They may admire your knowledge but not trust your leadership. One symptom of this mistake is apologizing mid-speech. "Sorry, I'm jumping around a bit," or "I'm not sure if I explained that clearly." When you catch yourself saying that, you're signaling to the audience that you don't have control of your own material. Even if they're polite, their perception of your authority drops. Another symptom, people keep asking, "So what's your main point?" Or "What should we do first?" That's a sign your structure is unclear. The good news is that structure is learnable. In fact, it's one of the simplest ways to boost your credibility instantly. When your talk has a clear, logical flow, people feel safe. They relax and listen. They assume you're competent and trustworthy, even before evaluating your content. Start by outlining your talk in big blocks. What's your opening hook? What's the main message or thesis? What are the 2 or 3 key points that support it? How will you end? Think of your talk like a story with a beginning, middle, and end. Even a technical presentation benefits from a narrative arc: problem, analysis, solution. This doesn't make you less professional, it makes you more memorable. Next, signal your structure to your audience. Don't keep it a secret. Tell them up front what to expect. Today I'll share 3 mistakes that most leaders make, why they matter, and how to fix them. That single sentence sets a mental map. As you move from one section to another, give verbal transitions. Now that we've looked at the first challenge, let's move to the second. These small cues keep people oriented and reinforce your authority. Repetition also helps. Summarize at the end of each section. Say, "So far we've learned X and Y. Next we'll explore Z." It may feel redundant to you, but it's a gift to your audience. It shows you're organized and respectful of their attention. It also boosts retention. They're more likely to remember your points later. Visual aids can support structure too. A simple agenda slide, a diagram, or a headline for each section acts as a signpost. But keep visuals minimal. Don't turn your slides into walls of text. Instead, use them as anchors. One phrase or image that signals where you are in the journey. Another key principle: cut tangents. Many speakers undermine themselves by chasing interesting side stories or data points that don't directly serve the main message. You might think you're adding richness, but from the audience's perspective, you're wandering. Authority comes from focus. If something doesn't clearly support your core idea, save it for the Q&A or another talk. Rehearsal is your friend here as well. Practice your talk out loud and time it. Notice where you hesitate or jump back. Those are weak spots in your structure. Rewrite transitions or reorder points until it flows naturally. A well-structured talk feels smooth, like a river. You move from point to point effortlessly, carrying your listeners with you. Here's a simple structure you can use for almost any talk. Hook: a story, question, or surprising fact to grab attention. Promise: what they'll gain from listening. 3 main points, each with a brief explanation or example. Summary: repeat the main message. Call to action or closing thought, something that leaves them inspired or clear about next steps. This is not the only structure, but it's reliable. Audiences intuitively understand it. It keeps you on track and projects authority. Sometimes you'll need to present complex material that doesn't fit neatly into 3 points. In that case, think in terms of phases or steps. For example, we're going to explore this issue in 4 stages, or there are 5 key components we need to discuss. The number doesn't matter as much as the clarity of progression. Show them the path, then walk them down it. If you're worried that structure will make you sound stiff, remember that freedom lives inside form. When you know your framework, you can improvise confidently because you always know where you're going. Without a framework, improvisation feels like wandering. With one, it feels like leadership. Even if you realize mid-speech that you've lost your structure, you can recover. Pause and reorient. Let me step back and give you the big picture before we go further. Audiences appreciate clarity. Admitting you're reorganizing can actually boost trust if you handle it calmly. It shows you care about their understanding, not just your script. Avoiding the mistake of speaking without structure will make you instantly more persuasive. People will stop wondering, "Where is this going?" and start following you willingly. They'll feel your authority not just in your words but in your leadership of their attention. Remember, a speech without structure is like a journey without a map. You might reach your destination, but no one will enjoy the ride, and some will get lost along the way. Give your audience a map, and they'll follow you anywhere. Chapter 5. A fifth mistake that silently eats away at your authority is overloading your audience with information. Many speakers think that the more facts, data, and points they cram into their talk, the more value they're giving. In reality, they're doing the opposite. Audiences don't remember everything you say, they remember how you made them feel and a handful of clear, well-chosen messages. When you flood them with too much, their brains shut down. Instead of appearing knowledgeable, you appear unfocused and inconsiderate of their time and mental space. Imagine sitting through a presentation where slide after slide is covered in small text, graphs, and bullet points. The speaker races to explain every detail, but nothing sticks. By the end, you can't recall a single key message. You're not alone. This is a natural cognitive response. Human attention is limited. We're wired to grasp stories and patterns, not encyclopedic data dumps. Overloading an audience makes them tune out, and worse, it makes you look like you don't know how to prioritize or distill your expertise. Another hidden danger is that information overload signals insecurity. Subconsciously, audiences may think, if they really understood this topic, they could explain it simply. True experts simplify without dumbing down. They make complex ideas feel clear and manageable. When you clutter your talk with excessive content, you're not demonstrating mastery, you're demonstrating anxiety. The solution begins before you even step on stage. Ask yourself, if my audience could remember only 3 things from this talk, what would they be? Build your speech around those pillars. Everything else should support them or be cut. Ruthless editing is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of respect and professionalism. Less truly is more when it comes to persuasion and authority. Use visuals sparingly and strategically. One powerful image can communicate more than 10 statistics. Stories and examples are more memorable than lists. And when you do present data, frame it in context. Explain why it matters and how it connects to your main point. This approach makes your message resonate instead of overwhelm. During your delivery, watch your pacing. Give the audience breathing room. A moment of silence after an important statement lets it sink in. Repetition of a key phrase cements it in memory. People don't mind being told something important twice. They mind being drowned in trivial details once. Finally, remember that authority isn't built by showing everything you know. It's built by showing that you know what matters most. When you cut away the noise and highlight the essence, you project confidence, clarity, and leadership. You're no longer a lecturer burying them in facts. You're a guide leading them to understanding. And that's the kind of speaker audiences trust and remember. Chapter 6. Another mistake that quietly erodes a speaker's credibility is ignoring the audience's energy and feedback. Too many presenters treat their talk as a one-way transmission. They have a script, slides, and timing, and they deliver it exactly the same no matter who is sitting in front of them. This robotic approach might feel safe, but it disconnects you from the people you're trying to influence. Authority isn't just about what you know, it's about how well you connect. Think of a time you attended a lecture where the speaker plowed through their material, eyes fixed on their notes or slides. No questions, no adjustments, no acknowledgement of the audience's mood. Even if the content was good, it felt cold and distant. Compare that to someone who notices when people lean forward, nod, or frown. and who shifts their tone or examples accordingly. The second speaker feels alive, responsive, human. That's the kind of presence that builds authority. Ignoring the audience's signals often stems from nervousness or overpreparation. Speakers worry they'll lose their place or forget something, so they cling to their outline. But that rigidity costs them presence. When you're too focused on your plan, you miss the subtle cues that tell you if you're reaching people or losing them. The remedy is practicing active awareness. Before your talk, learn about the people you're addressing, their interests, challenges, and level of familiarity with your topic. During your talk, make eye contact with individuals across the room. Watch their expressions and body language. Are they engaged? Confused? Amused? Adjust your pace, your examples, or even your format on the fly. Ask a question. Invite a quick show of hands. Brief interaction doesn't weaken your authority. It strengthens it by showing you're confident enough to step off script. Tone and energy matter too. If the room feels sleepy, raise your voice slightly, inject a story, or move physically closer. If it's tense, slow down, lower your tone, and acknowledge the tension. This isn't about being an entertainer. It's about showing that you care enough to be present with your audience. Presence is power. The paradox is that you actually become more authoritative when you appear flexible. Audiences read responsiveness as confidence. A rigid speaker seems insecure and self-focused. A responsive speaker seems self-assured and audience-focused. The first loses trust, the second earns it. By treating every speech as a living conversation rather than a canned performance, you project authenticity and control. You're no longer delivering a talk, you're leading an experience. And that's what true authority looks like on stage. Chapter 7. Another mistake that quietly undercuts a speaker's authority is poor body language. You can have a great message, polished slides, even a perfect voice, but if your posture, gestures, and facial expressions contradict your words, the audience will believe your body, not your speech. Humans are hardwired to read nonverbal signals. Long before we learned language, body language told us who was confident, who was afraid, who could be trusted. On stage, your body is constantly broadcasting, whether you intend it or not. Think about the difference between a speaker who stands slouched, arms crossed, eyes darting down at the floor, and one who stands tall, open, and grounded. The content might be the same, but the perception of authority is completely different. Inconsistent or closed body language makes you look uncertain or defensive, even if your words sound confident. Audiences sense this mismatch and quietly withdraw their trust. A common error is pacing or fidgeting without purpose. Nervous speakers shuffle their feet, sway, or play with their hands, which distracts the audience and drains their message of impact. Others lock themselves behind a podium, gripping it as if it were a lifeline. Both extremes, excessive movement or rigid stillness, send the wrong signals. Authority lives in calm, deliberate movement. Another pitfall is the neutral mask, speaking without any facial expression. People don't just listen to your words, they watch your face to understand how you feel about what you're saying. If your expression stays flat, your enthusiasm doesn't come through. Conversely, exaggerated or forced gestures look unnatural and theatrical. The sweet spot is authentic, purposeful expression. A smile when you share a positive point, a pause and serious look when you share something weighty. Improving your body language begins with awareness. Record yourself rehearsing and watch without sound. Do you look confident? Are your gestures open or closed? Does your stance say, "I'm comfortable here," or "I want to disappear"? Small changes, planting your feet shoulder-width apart, keeping your chest open, making eye contact with different parts of the room, have a big effect. Use gestures to reinforce, not replace, your message. If you're counting points, show numbers on your fingers. If you're describing growth, move your hands upward. These natural signals help your audience follow along. Keep your hands visible, not hidden in pockets or behind your back. And slow down. Moving or gesturing slightly less but with more intention makes you appear centered and in control. Finally, remember that body language is not an extra, it's half the message. When your words, tone, and body align, you radiate congruence. Congruence is what audiences read as confidence. They don't just hear your authority, they feel it. And feeling it is what makes them believe you. Chapter 8. Another mistake that consistently weakens a speaker's authority is using unclear or overly complicated language. Many people think that the more sophisticated their vocabulary, the more respect they'll earn. In practice, the opposite happens. Big words and jargon rarely impress an audience. They frustrate them. People don't want to decode your speech like a puzzle. They want to understand it instantly. Authority isn't about sounding smart. It's about making your audience feel smart. Think about how you feel when someone bombards you with acronyms, insider terms, or endless qualifiers. You tune out. You may even suspect the speaker is hiding a lack of substance behind fancy language. Now picture someone who takes a complex idea and explains it simply, clearly, without condescension. That speaker feels confident and trustworthy. We tend to believe people who make things clear because clarity signals mastery. This mistake often comes from insecurity. When we're nervous, we slip into complicated phrasing to sound professional. Or we mimic academic papers, corporate reports, or other formal writing styles that don't translate well to spoken language. On stage, those habits backfire. Spoken communication is about rhythm, flow, and connection, not about impressing an editor. To correct this, imagine you're explaining your topic to an intelligent friend who knows nothing about it. What words would you choose? How would you break it down? Read your draft out loud. If it feels heavy or unnatural in your mouth, your audience will feel it too. Edit until your sentences are conversational and clean. Another tip, prefer concrete words to abstract ones. Don't say utilize, say use. Don't say initiate, say start. Swap ameliorate for improve. It's not dumbing down, it's lifting up. Simple words travel faster and land harder. They leave less room for misunderstanding. Stories and analogies help too. They act like mental hooks for your listeners. A single vivid example can make a complex point more digestible than a paragraph of explanation. When you give your audience mental images, you're speaking their language, not your own. Finally, remember that the goal of public speaking is not to demonstrate your vocabulary, it's to transfer your idea. If your audience leaves understanding and remembering what you said, you've succeeded. Clear language makes you look more confident, more credible, and more human. That's the foundation of real authority on stage. Chapter 9. One of the most damaging mistakes a speaker can make is failing to handle mistakes gracefully. Everyone trips over a word, forgets a point, or mispronounces something now and then. What separates respected speakers from forgettable ones is not whether they make mistakes, but how they respond when it happens. Audiences don't expect perfection, they expect composure. When you crumble under a small slip, your credibility takes a bigger hit than the mistake itself ever could. Picture two scenarios. In the first, a speaker loses their place, freezes, and begins apologizing profusely or fumbling with papers. The tension in the room spikes, and the audience starts feeling uncomfortable for them. In the second scenario, the speaker pauses, smiles, maybe makes a light-hearted remark, and continues. The audience relaxes. The slip disappears from their memory almost instantly. The difference isn't in skill, it's in mindset. The impulse to hide or overcorrect mistakes usually comes from fear of judgment. We think every stumble exposes incompetence. In truth, a small stumble handled with poise shows the opposite. It shows humanity, adaptability, and confidence. When you recover calmly, you demonstrate control not only of your material but of yourself. There are practical ways to get better at this. First, rehearse enough so you know your content deeply. If you forget one line, you still know where you're headed. Second, practice intentional pauses. A pause is your friend. It buys you time to think without looking panicked. Third, have a couple of neutral phrases ready. Something like, let's take a moment to, or here's what I meant to say, so you can pivot smoothly if needed. It also helps to keep your focus outward, not inward. When you make a mistake, don't get stuck in your head replaying it. Look at your audience. They're probably still with you. They don't care nearly as much as you do. Keep talking to them, not to your anxiety. Finally, remember that vulnerability handled with composure builds trust. A speaker who can laugh off a glitch or move past it shows they're authentic and resilient. Those are traits of real leaders. Perfection may impress for a moment, but composure under pressure inspires lasting respect. And that's the kind of authority you want on stage. Chapter 10. The 10th mistake that silently undermines a speaker's authority is neglecting to prepare for questions and interactions with the audience. Many presenters see the Q&A portion as an afterthought, something to survive rather than an opportunity to reinforce credibility. This is a serious misstep. How you handle questions can either solidify your authority or expose weaknesses in knowledge, composure, or confidence. Consider a common scenario. After a talk, someone asks a challenging question. The speaker freezes, mumbles, or gives a vague answer. Instantly, the audience notices. Even if the rest of the presentation was strong, this moment casts doubt on the speaker's expertise. People remember how you respond under pressure more than they remember bullet points. Authority is reinforced or eroded in these moments. Fear of questions often stems from insecurity. We worry about not knowing the answer or looking foolish. Some speakers preemptively avoid eye contact during Q&A or rush through responses, signaling discomfort. Ironically, the very act of avoiding questions reduces your perceived mastery. It tells the audience, consciously or not, that you're not confident in your own subject. Preparation is the antidote. Anticipate possible questions ahead of time. Think about what skeptics, curious minds, or critical peers might ask. Craft concise, honest responses. Practicing with a colleague or friend who asks challenging questions can simulate the live experience and reduce anxiety. The more familiar you are with potential scenarios, the more composed you will be. Equally important is your mindset. Approach questions as opportunities, not threats. Each question is a chance to demonstrate expertise, clarify points, or even build rapport. When someone asks a tough question, pause, listen carefully, and respond thoughtfully. If you don't know the answer, admit it honestly and offer to follow up. Audiences respect honesty far more than a forced, inaccurate answer. Body language and tone during Q&A are crucial. Maintain eye contact, nod to show you understand the question, and keep a calm, measured voice. Avoid defensive postures or rush gestures. Even if the question challenges your viewpoint, respond respectfully. This demonstrates not just knowledge but composure and leadership. Another subtle point: repeating or summarizing the question before answering accomplishes two things. First, it buys you a few extra seconds to organize your thoughts. Second, it ensures everyone in the audience hears it clearly. This small practice signals professionalism and authority. Finally, don't rush the conclusion of your answer. After responding, pause briefly to let the audience absorb your explanation. Then smoothly transition back to your core message. This reinforces control and keeps the flow of the presentation intact. Neglecting preparation for questions can undo the work of an entire presentation. Conversely, handling Q&A with poise elevates your authority. It shows mastery, composure, and respect for your audience's curiosity. In the end, your ability to navigate the unexpected is as important as the content you prepared in advance. Remember, authority isn't just about speaking perfectly, it's about responding wisely. Treat questions as allies, not adversaries. Prepare, practice, and approach them with confidence. That's the mark of a speaker who commands respect not only during the presentation but afterward as well. Conclusion: As we reach the end of this journey through the 10 biggest mistakes in public speaking, one truth becomes clear. Authority is not born from knowledge alone. It is earned through presence, clarity, connection, and composure. A brilliant idea delivered poorly, or an impeccable speech undermined by small missteps, can leave an audience disengaged or skeptical. Conversely, a speaker who masters these subtleties commands attention, respect, and trust. We've explored a series of pitfalls: failing to connect, overloading information, reading instead of speaking, lacking structure, ignoring body language, using complex or unclear language, mishandling mistakes, and neglecting Q&A, among others. Each mistake erodes authority in its own way, yet all share a common root: a gap between intention and perception. You might know your subject deeply, but if the audience cannot follow, relate, or trust you, that knowledge alone won't persuade or inspire. The good news is that authority is learnable. Awareness is the first step. Recognizing your own tendencies, whether it's the urge to over-explain, the temptation to hide behind notes, or the fear of difficult questions, gives you the power to change. Practice, reflection, and conscious adjustment transform these weaknesses into strengths. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be intentional, present, and confident. Authority also thrives on simplicity and focus. Distill your message to what truly matters. Speak in a way that your audience can understand and remember. Align your words with your body, your tone, and your energy. Treat your audience as partners in conversation, not as passive recipients. Respect their time, their attention, and their intelligence. These small yet powerful behaviors create a sense of leadership that resonates far beyond the stage. Remember, mistakes happen to everyone. What separates memorable speakers from forgettable ones is not the absence of errors, but how those errors are handled. Recovering gracefully, acknowledging briefly if necessary, and continuing with composure reinforces credibility. Similarly, anticipating questions, staying connected to the audience, and structuring your message thoughtfully ensures that you guide, not confuse. Finally, authority is not static. It's a practice. Every presentation is an opportunity to refine your skills, deepen your connection, and expand your influence. Even small improvements in delivery, clarity, or engagement accumulate over time. The speaker who commits to growth consistently strengthens their presence and impact. In public speaking, every detail matters. Your words, gestures, timing, and responsiveness collectively shape perception. Mastery comes not from perfection, but from mindful execution. Apply the lessons in this book, reflect on your own style, and embrace the journey of becoming a speaker whose authority is felt as much as it is heard. Step onto the stage with awareness, clarity, and confidence. Lead with intention, and your audience will follow, not just because of what you say, but because of who you are. Authority is within your reach, waiting to be claimed.